Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem. Shem Eden Shir. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from our Rabbi Yakov Smith Shlita on Shabbos Chadoshes B'Issur Shaya V'Chazor B'Shabbos. Hot plate, warming drawer, etc. on Shabbos. That's a great exclusive sponsoring a shir called Irgun Shir Torah 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshiva.com. Rav Smith.
A while ago, someone asked me about taking food from the refrigerator and on Shabbos putting it into a warming drawer. At the time, I wasn't familiar with the warming drawer. We'll soon see the details, but I'm very thankful because this really touches upon many shilas that are negayah to all of us, whether you have a warming drawer or not. And I'll mention a few of them. Sometimes people want to put food from the refrigerator onto the side of the blech to warm it, take out the chill. People want to put challah onto the blech to warm the challah. Someone asked about using a sterno on Shabbos. We'll soon see what that is. But the emphasis, as we'll see, it's a number of other shilas that are really negayah to the Yiddish home in many different ways. And as our derech is, we always try to clarify one yesod, which I think today is a basic yesod of the issur bishul, and then we'll have enough information besides, of course, the warming drawer, but all the other shilas as well. I think the klal one is to know what the story is told. Someone asked us out Merav about moving the challah pot closer to the fire to get warmer. So he responded, "Erev the chalein as mishpilt nish with fire." That's step number one. Don't play with fire. And the emphasis when you learn Hilchos Shabbos, it's all over this klal. The Ran in Shabbos, Daf Yud Zayin, wonders why there are so many gezeres d'Rabbanan regarding bishul. Reish Nun Gimel, Reish Nun Dalet, Reish Nun Zayin, Shin Yud Ches, all those big simonim are all gezeres d'Rabbanan. And the Ran says because it's kroivim lavai lidei issur Torah. A person could move the challah pot closer to the fire. What's wrong? What do you mean, what's wrong? The challah not fully cooked. Some of it was not cooked yet. It's bishul deraisa. Mishpilt nish mit fire. And it's easy to sometimes be oibo without realizing an issur bishul deraisa. So that's why, as we'll see, we have to know what we're doing before we do it. But then again, Einik Shabbos is a mitzvah. So one thing we see clearly, if you have food that is fully cooked, chicken, kugel, and there's no problem of bishul, because it ain't bishul acha bishul. But we all know to take that cold chicken and put it onto the blech on Shabbos is asa. Now why is it asa? There's no bishul. So this is what's known as mechzikim mevashel. Basically it's not bishul, because it ain't bishul acha bishul. But what you're doing is a ma'isa bishul. Rather, this food is fully cooked, so it's mutter. But what's going to be the food that's not fully cooked or a liquid that cooled off? So basically, even though it's mutter, Chazal made an issur on Shabbos of mechzikim mevashel. It looks like cooking. Then we have another category, and that's called chazor. Now, of course, when you learn Torah, chazor is a mitzvah, but on Shabbos is an issur d'Rabbanan. What's the sugya? So the common case is erev on Leil Shabbos. Some people want to have a little bit challah Friday night, so they want to take off the challah and put it back. Now, the challah is still piping hot. What's wrong with putting it back onto the blech? There's no bishul, true. But this is what's called chazara on Shabbos, which is also asal mechzikim mevashel. Because basically you're taking food and putting it onto the fire. That's the concept of bishul. Now, granted, this case is mutter, but that too closely resembles a real ma'isa bishul. So we see what's called in halacha as nesina, to putting food on the fire on Shabbos, which really should be mutter, but it's also al tzmechzi, and returning food chazar on Shabbos also al tzmechzi kimavash. Now both of them also the second reason, and that's shem yechata, you might make the fire bigger, but the primary reason in both is mechzi kimavash. But what's probably the biggest chiddush, and that is what we all do, and perhaps you don't realize, that we even have chilul Shabbos on erev Shabbos. How could that be? Very simple. We put food on the fire, but not on the fire directly, even erev Shabbos. We have a blech. Why do you need a blech? Why can I put a challah on the fire erev Shabbos? There's no chilul Shabbos, erev Shabbos. So this is the big sugya of shahiyah, which basically means that a person might take food, that basically he might make the fire bigger. Right now, it's erev Shabbos, but on Shabbos comes, he might make the fire bigger. So even erev Shabbos, he has to be realized mishpil nishmit fire. And therefore he puts a blech, and once he has a blech, that's a built-in reminder not to play with the fire, and that avoids the issue. So we have 3 issurim drabanan, reminding us we don't play with fire. We have what's called nesina, putting food on the fire on Shabbos, which really should be mutter, because ein bishul acha bishul, merzikim avashul. Chazara is also asa als merzi, and we have erev Shabbos shehiyah. We have a blech because of shem yechat. Now let's go slow. We know that sometimes we do put back food on the fire on Shabbos. Those that take off the challah, scoops them out, they put it back. What about the issur of chazara? So this we spoke about in the past, but we need it, so let's just review very quickly. There's a few preconditions that it's mutter to put food back onto the blech on Shabbos. And I remember I heard this many years ago when I first learned Hilchos Shabbos from the Machab of Klalim, Hilchos Shabbos. All you have to remember is the Aleph Beis, actually Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav. Those 5 letters, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, are the 5 conditions that permit returning food to the fire on Shabbos. Beis, you have to have a blech. Okay? There's no blech, you can't put it back on Shabbos. Gimel, the food has to be fully cooked, gekocht. Okay, it's bilingual. Lashon Kodesh and Yiddish. Dalid, daitoi lachzer, you take it off and you want to put it back. Now you took it off, put it in the refrigerator, I want to put it back. No good. It has to be daitoi lachzer. Hey, oide biyadoi, it has to be still in your hand, that's hand. And vav, it has to be varim, it has to be warm. Because if you have a chong that cooled off, and now it's cool, now it's yesh bishul acha bishul by a davalach. So if you have Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, you could put back the food onto the blech, even on Shabbos. And a perfect example is you took off challah on Friday night and served some, and you want to put it back. So preconditions, blech, gekocht, daitei lachzer, hand, and varim, and you're good to go. Now, on erev Shabbos, you want to keep food on the fire. So you wonder, what's wrong? Mishmit fire. So you have to have a blech. Why? Shem yechata, you might stir the fire. Now, here the question is, Bishleim, at times of the Gemara, they kept food on a fire, and the fire diminished and fluctuates. So it started to get smaller, it might go out. It won't do its job. So then there was Shem yechata, you would stoke the coals, the wood. That involves 2 issurei Torah. Number 1, making a fire bigger is havara. Also, making a fire bigger to cook quicker is bishul. So, in the times of the Gemara that they use a real fireplace, it makes sense Shem yechata because the fire got smaller and you want to reignite it and make it bigger. But I'm using a stovetop. It doesn't fluctuate. It maintains the same steady fire, flame. Why do you need a blech? The answer is very simple. You might adjust the knob. You might make it from low to high. That's also making the fire bigger is bishul deraisa. Havara. So therefore, we have a blech to try to simulate what they had, the blech in those days. Now, the emissaries of Moshe, many poskim say, the real blech should be put on the makom ha'esh. We have a blech on the fire. Like they did, they sprinkled sand onto the fire. But it's better to also cover the knobs, because that's the makom of chitui. So that's why many people have a blech that covers the flame, and it bends over and also covers the knob. Fine. So we have 3 isurei derabanan, nesina, lechatchila, putting food on the fire on Shabbos, chazara, and we have shehiyah. Now let's apply it to the new shilas that we're going to discuss today. Someone wants to use a warming drawer. Now let me explain a little bit about the metzias. A warming drawer is very simple. Typically, most of them are a regular drawer. It looks in the kitchen. It looks like a different regular drawer. It is a drawer that slides out. You could put food in, and the warming drawer is designed to keep warm. Typically, it ranges from 120 degrees, to the maximum is 240, maybe 250, but not more. The metzias, as we'll soon see, is you can't cook in a warming drawer. I mean, you could leave it there many, many hours, and it'll get cooked. But the warming drawer that reaches the temperature approximately from, the high from 220, 240, but not higher than that, it doesn't cook unless you keep it many hours. Why? And it's not a Yiddish product, but many Yidden prefer it on Shabbos because you could warm all the food before Shabbos, putting in the warming drawer. It's a machaya. You don't have to keep the gas range on. The kitchen is not so hot, and because it's a small box, it maintains the heat much longer. And you could also have it a Shabbos mode that it shuts off after a while. You could put all the food in and it keeps it very hot. But the question is, how are you putting all the food in erev Shabbos? Where's your blech? You have to have a blech erev Shabbos. We have a blech on the gas range. Why is the warming drawer different? So the truth is, you say, wait a minute, I have a blech because I don't see the fire. The fire is covered. I mean, the heating element is covered. But then, when do you need a blech on a stovetop? I see the fire in the times of Chazal when they had a fire. Maybe the fact that the heating element is covered, maybe that's the blech, but that's not true. Because, first of all, we know we use a blech by a crock pot. Crock pot also, the heating element is covered. No appliance is sold that there's an exposed heating element. That's dangerous. It's a good time. The heating element is covered, but that l'chayr doesn't make sense. Because it's not a din. If you cover the heating element, you're okay. The point of a blech, a grufa ketum, is you made a covering. You made a heka. During the week when you use the fireplace, use it as it is. Erev Shabbos, you have to put a cover on it, sprinkle sand, to show that I'm not going to be mechated. I made a heka. But if that's the way the appliance is used, it's always covered. Where's the heka? In other words, you have to make a heka, not that there's a covering. And this, as early as the Maril, one of the Gdoli Rishonim, Mr. Bur and Reish Nun Gimel, Sit Kot and Pei Aleph, quotes it, that in Maril's time, they started having a more modern way of cooking. They had a box, a metal box. The fire was inside, and they kept food on top of the box. So somebody asked Maril, do you have to have a blech? Because the fire was covered by the box. So Maril says, yeah, that's the way you cook. It's not a heka. It's a covering, not a heka. You need a heka. And this is why the poskim say that it's not enough that the heating element is covered. You have to make a additional cover, like a blech, to give it a din of grufa ketuma. That's why those that use a crock pot will put a heavy-duty aluminum foil as the blech. Oh, that's a heka that I know it's there, and that's functional. The Har Tzvi in Siman Kuf Lamed Vav, Kamat says it's beferish, that the fact that the heating element is covered is not enough of a blech. You have to put down a blech. So now the shaila is, where's the blech on a warming drawer? So I'll tell you two possible svaras. Did you ever wonder, many Yidden use a urn on Shabbos. Did you ever see a urn that has a blech on it? Teretz said, well, you can't do it. So that's not an excuse. So how do we use an urn on Shabbos? There's no blech. So I'll tell you one simple svara. Why do you need a blech? The food is cooked. The teretz is shem b'yachata. Now let's assume you have a urn that it's non-adjustable. It's no high, low, medium. You put it on and it boils. You can't raise the temperature or lower the temperature. So if it's not adjustable, there's no shem b'yachata. The times of Chazal, the fire fluctuated. Our gas range, you could raise the temperature, lower it, that's shem b'yachata. But if you have a urn that is non-adjustable, so why do you need a blech? And indeed that's true. And that's why the poskim seem to say clearly that if you have a heating, a crack, anything actually, any heating element, any appliance that is not adjustable, there's no reason for a blech. The Har Tzvi in Siman Kuf Lamed Vav discusses this shaila, and he brings a beautiful raya, because the Kiva Ega and the Bir Loch in Shin Yud Ches discuss keeping food in the sun from erev Shabbos. Now, you're allowed to cook in the sun on Shabbos. It's mutter. Can you keep food before Shabbos in Tol Dois Cham, what the sun heated? And the Kiva Ega and the Bir Loch says it's mutter. The question is, where's the blech? How can you keep food erev Shabbos? Where's the blech? Teretz is, what do you plan on doing if you want to be mechata? Climb on a ladder and stir the sun? There's no shem yechata by the sun. If there's no shem yechata, there's no reason for a blech. Says the Har Tzvi, any non-adjustable appliance doesn't need a blech because it's not sheikh shem yechata. The question is, some urns do have an adjustable mode, and some have a reboil button that maybe you will press on Shabbos to make it hot. So for this we have another major yisoid in our sugya. And in Reish Lin Gimel Sif Aleph, the Mechaber says there's a yesh oimer that when do you need a blech b'chlal erev Shabbos? Only food that is basically raw and inedible. Once the food reaches the minimal temperature of Maichel ben Derusoi, which we have to assume is a half cooked. Once it's a half cooked and it's edible as it is, you don't need a blech. What's the logic? Very simple. Why are you so concerned to have a blech? Shem yechat. He's nervous. It's not going to be ready. It's going to be raw. But once the food was at least half cooked erev Shabbos, you're not in that panic. It's edible as it is. So even though the first sheet told it has to be nizbashel kol sarkai, but the Yesh Oimim says once it's cooked halfway, you don't need a blech. Now, the truth is, we are machmel lachatchila, and we put a blech by all foods. But mi'ikad din, you could be mekel b'shas atchak. A person, let's say, comes before Shabbos to a place, he has no blech, and he's panicking. What do I do? No problem. You can put the fire on. As long as the food is cooked halfway, you don't need a blech. Now, make sure no one sees, because, you won't be married for children. Well, what kind of yid is he? Where's his blech? But mi'ikad din, if it's cooked halfway, you don't need a blech. Now, where is this much more noigeya? Because we all use a blech. This is going to be noigeya by an urn, or a crock pot, or any appliance that we don't have a blech. We can't make a blech. As long as the food is cooked at least halfway, we'll rely on the shita that you don't need a blech. So whether we know this or not, people keep food in the oven on Shabbos, from erev Shabbos, of course. Where's your blech in the oven? Teretz is, if as long as the food is cooked at least halfway, you could rely on the ikad din that you don't need a blech. So this is why there's no doubt about it. Keeping food in a warming drawer on erev Shabbos, you don't need a blech. Why? Because the food is fully cooked. Don't forget, you can't put half-cooked food in a warming drawer. It will not cook it. So if you put the food in before Shabbat that's fully cooked, it's certainly halfway cooked, and therefore, mi'ikad din, you don't need a blech. Now, Lamaisa, there are some poskim, and that's attributed to Chazaynish, the Chutshani, and Chelik Beis, Kuf Yudalit says, you can't be makel and say, well, this appliance, there's no Shem Yechata. Chazal made a gzeira, you have to have a blech. They didn't like this svara that if it's non-adjustable, it's mutter, adjustable is awesome. They made a light plug. But, again, the poskim say, you could b'shas atchak, there's a good svara to say that you don't need a blech because it's non-adjustable. Okay, let's go to the next question. Someone has a warming drawer. He took out a piece of kugel for Friday night, and he wants to put it back for Shabbos day. He took it out, and he wants to put it back into the warming drawer. Is that any problem? So let's go through our checklist. Beis, Gimel, Dal, Hey, Vav. Well, guess what? We failed on the first one, because there's no blech in the warming drawer. It's gekocht, it's das, hand, varm, all good. But where's your blech? So how could you put the food back into the warming drawer on Shabbos? There's no blech. So some people put a blech in before Shabbos, and very good. But let's say you don't have a blech, or you didn't put a blech. So I'm going to tell you the asvara that really is the yesod of today's shir, is the uniqueness of a warming drawer and makes it so challenging and so fascinating in halacha. Because unlike a crock pot or even a slow cooker, the design of a warming drawer is to keep warm. That's the label, that's the identification. It's not made to cook food. So let me ask you a simple question. Let's say a person puts back a piece of hot kugel into the warming drawer without a blech. Is it mechzik mavashel? Nobody cooks in a warming drawer. Now again, it's very unusual to have this mitzias, but let me explain. The typical warming drawer ranges from 120. I asked them, why make it 120? The fancy people like to keep the plates hot. So they put it into 120, keeps plates hot. Okay. But typically it goes to get 120, some of them are 190. Shabbos mode does not exceed 190. But they go up to officially 220, but it really it's 240 and maybe even 250. But lemetzias, to put raw food into a warming drawer, it's going to take many, many hours to cook. Now you're going to ask me, I don't understand. Yatsu led this boy is 175. Some say even 110, but 175 for sure. So how could it be? It's not Mersim Mevashel, it's 175. What's the shaykhis? 175 could cook, but it's going to take many hours. So basically, when you see a warming drawer, is the whole warming drawer Mersim Mevashel, or it's one big rewarmer? But it's not a Mersim Mevashel. So this is the challenge of a warming drawer. It exceeds the temperatures of Yad Soledes, but it's just not Merzik Mavashel. B'yesa beer, b'yesa gishmak. Let's say a person decides to be a lamdan. He wants to use his oven on Shabbos. He wants to put it back and take out food, but he wants to have a free reign. So he has a chachma. He'll set the oven at 180. And I'll take it out, put it back. That's a problem. Because an oven is one big Merzik Mavashel. What else do you cook but the oven? But the warming drawer, no sensible person uses it to cook. It can be 10 hours, I don't know how many hours, I was told between 7, 8, and 10 hours, but it's just not done. Even a hot plate will soon see some of them reach a temperature of 900 degrees. Ooh, that's a mavashel. So this is the challenge. L'choira, it should even be mutter, listen to this, to take a cold piece of kugel from the refrigerator and put it into the warming drawer. Why not? Again, the kugel was fully cooked. Ein bishul acha bishul. The only problem is merzik mavashel. It's not merzik mavashel. So it should even be mutter lechatchilas nesina on Shabbos. Unlike an oven, unlike a hot plate that could cook, some of them at least, unlike a slow cooker that cooks. So here basically it is not merzik mavashel. But it's even more than that, because here we have a raya to that, l'choira to the following. Let's say a person wants to have hot kugel on Shabbos. Unexpected guests came. Doesn't have enough kugel. Is there any way l'chatchila to rewarm to a boiling point a piece of cold chicken or cold kugel that's fully cooked and is not moist? I'm not to a double yavesh. So there are two viable options, both of them l'chatchila gomer. For both of them, we probably all do at different times. Take the kugel that's yavesh dry and put it on top of a challah pot. That's the Shulchan Aruch in Reish Nun Gimel Sifei based on a Rashba. And if you have a nice flame under the challah pot, that piece of kugel will get piping hot. Why is that mutter? Teretz is up to Rashba. Because ein derech bishul b'kach. No one cooks pudding on top of a challah pot. It's getting warm, so what do you care? Ein bishul acha bishul. The only problem is merzik mavashel. That's not the derech bishul. So we see that you could warm food. The only problem is if it's merzik mavashel, right? Second raya, and assuming this sterno is my blech. So the emes, I've done this and it works. You could take a piece of cold food and put it adjacent to the blech, on the side of the blech, not on top of the blech, on the side of the blech. Now the metzias is, if the fire is right there, and don't forget, the blech is sitting on the flame, it's diverting the flame to go outward. That food could definitely get hot and some get burnt. if you have a big enough flame. It's channeling the flame outwards. That is perfectly mutlach challah by a davar yavesh. Shulchan Aruch Shir Yud Chesif Tezvav says this very case on a dry food you're allowed to warm it. Zok Mishter Berurah, why? Because it's not nerikim b'vashel. So we have two cases that you could warm food on Shabbos lechatchila because there's ein bishul acha bishul b'davar yavesh and it's not mechzikim b'vashel. Well, guess what? In our 21st century, there's a new member to the club. Another case that is mutter to warm is not mechzikim b'vashel. And what is that? Shkarish might be Yisrael, warming drawer. Since no one cooks in it, it's not mechzikim b'vashel. Now, unfortunately, there is no earlier posek that I could point to because they didn't have it in the earlier posek. But what I did see, Rav Moshe has a tshuva in Chelek Dal Siman Ayin Dal Sif Katan Lamed Hey. Rav Moshe did not see a warming drawer in his lifetime, but he was aware of what's called a hot plate. And Rav Moshe basically says that if the heat of the hot plate cannot cook, it just keeps warm. And again, there are different types. Many of, especially the plotter of the Shabbos plotter, are designed to keep warm and not cook. They reach temperature maybe 300 degrees. I'm not talking about all of them, but those that cannot cook, so Moshe says if it can't cook and it's a non-adjustable model, so what's your problem? His only problem was Shem Yechata because it's high, low, and medium. But the point is that on a hot plate that only keeps warm and cannot cook, there's no problem on Shabbos. And the Shmir Shabbos in Aleph Lamed, and quoting of Shlomo Zalman, who seem to feel that it's even mutter to take from the refrigerator and put it onto a hot plate that only warms and doesn't cook because it's not mechzikim b'vashel. Now, Lamaisa in the Sefer Ma'or HaShabbos Chelik Beis Amud Tov Kuf Mem Gimel, there's a letter from Shlomo Zalman, which was he wrote after the Shmir Shabbos, and he says, but I'm a little concerned because it looks like you are warming it on Shabbos. So he wasn't so certain about taking from the fridge and putting it onto the hot plate. But we definitely see a metzius that if it's not mechzikim b'vashel, because no one cooks on it, why can you put it from the refrigerator into the warming drawer? And there's another svara which applies to a plotter, and it's interesting. The Marshag, who lived 100 plus years ago, Chelik Beis Siman Nun, was asked in his times a new way of keeping food warm. And the Marshag said a novel svara, that this new method is only made to keep things warm on Shabbos. It's not used during the week. So maybe that alone is the heka. I guess it's like it was the old time Shabbos mode. But this design was used only on Shabbos. So the Dr. Marshag, it's miyuchad rak l'Shabbos, and you don't cook it during the week. It's not mechzikim b'vashel. And he has an analogy, like you're allowed to learn Perek Mamem Madlikin Keneged Haner, because you have a built-in reminder, don't be mechata. So he wants to say maybe something that's only used on Shabbos, there's no problem of anything. Not mechzikim b'vashel. The Yaskil Avdi in Chelik Zayin Siman Chav Ches Sidka and Ches discusses a plotter shel Shabbos, and he said originally I was not mekel, but people use it. Maybe you know why it's mutter? Because it's a plotter shel Shabbos, and it's not mechzikim b'vashel because everybody knows it's only for Shabbos. Okay, now this svara is an interesting chiddush, but only works for a plotter shel Shabbos that's made for Shabbos. The warming drawers is not made for Yidden, not made by Yidden. It's a goyish, item, which is convenient to keep things warm. But at least we have the other svara that a warming drawer is not mechzikim b'vashel. So basically, if the food is fully cooked, it's not a liquid where yesh bishul acha bishul, it's a solid and bishul acha bishul. L'choyra, it would be mutter to take food from the refrigerator and put it into the warming drawer on Shabbos. It's not mechzikim b'vashel. The only issue we have is that because it has adjustable modes, there's high, low, and medium. Rav Moshe, who was makel by a hot plate, was only when it's non-adjustable. So the eighth is put heavy aluminum foil on the floor of it, and if you want to be extra from, cover the knobs as well. Once you make the appropriate groove of a ketuma, you can't go wrong. Now, Lamaisa, I saw, and there's a beautiful kuntres that discusses the sugya of warming drawer in Eitz Chaim Chayveres Chavav, and there's a svara there, Rabbi Yeshua Hershkowitz is eingesund, a beautiful svara that maybe on a warming drawer there is no chashash of Shem Yechata Bechlal. Why? So basically, what this is based on a yisoid that the yisoid of Shem Yechata, as I mentioned earlier, is that a person by being mechata chas v'shalom comes to two isurei Torah. Stoking a fire is havor, and once you make the fire bigger, it's bishul deraisa on the food. But even if a person would chas v'shalom raise the temperature on a warming drawer on Shabbos, he's not going to cook the food. The food is fully cooked. There's no chashash bishul. I raising the temperature from low to high. So the truth is that's not a deraisa. Because making from 190 to 220 or 250, what malacha deraisa is it? Adding extra current, I'm not getting into the details why, that's not a deraisa. The only thing is, if you machame matches, if you cook or heat a piece of metal until it's glowingly hot, that's the issur of havara. The mitzias is that these hot plates that reach a temperature maximum of 250, it never gets glowing hot. It has to be a few hundred degrees that needs a glowing hot metal. The mitzias, it never gets glowingly hot. So if that's the case, it never involves a malacha deraisa. In that same kuntres, Amid Reish Yud Aleph, they quote Rafal, the Marzeliyo, who has a whole different svar why there's no Shem Yechata by a warming drawer. Because Chazal made the Gezeira Shem Yechata, times of the Gemara, because you might come to cook food. The warming drawer never ever cooks food. So you want to make an egg and Gezeira? Who said you're authorized to make an egg and Gezeira? So there are even svaras that there's no Shem Yechata by a warming drawer. But certainly, if a person has a warming drawer with a blech on it, he can't go wrong. There's no Shem Yechat, there's no problem of merzikim avashol if it can't cook. It's just incapable of cooking. Again, if you leave it 10 hours, it might cook, but basically it is not designed to cook. However, in that same kuntres, there's a tshuva from the Sat Madai of Getzel Berkowitz, who has a problem. First of all, his problem is, it is adjustable. I guess he didn't assume that you make a chiluk, what's the ramifications of it? But once you could adjust it, that's a problem. And his main problem, which is really the uniqueness of this warming drawer, is that at the end of the day, it reaches a temperature of 250 degrees. And that is way beyond Yatzel Edispai. So why do we say that that would be a problem of Merzi Kimachamim? There's a problem of Shem Yechata, because it has knobs, and Lamaisa, you're going to warm it. The Rav Vosna is also quoted as saying that an warming drawer is Merzi Kimachamim, which really it is. I mean, you're putting it in for a reason, you want to warm it. So, basically, again, this is the uniqueness. You could say, well, wait 1 second, it's not merzik mavashiv, you can't cook in it. But then again, it's able, it has the temperature way beyond the Yad Saladis boy, and it's designed to warm. It's unlike on top of a challah pot that's not made to warm things. That's a very, Shabbostic way of doing it, but you don't buy a challah pot to cook on top of it. On the side of the blech is not made to warm. But this warming drawer, you spend a nice few dollars to buy a appliance that warms food on Shabbos. Why is it merzik machame? So again, you could hear both svaras if you want to see, the svaras of Machmirim, that he brings a raya from the Rav Shulchan Aruch, all in that kuntris. But at the end of the day, even the Machmirim would say that if you have a blech, and that covers the issue of merzik mavashel, it should be mutter. So basically, the issue here is, can you take food from the refrigerator that's fully cooked and put it lechatchila into the warming drawer on Shabbos? The svar lahakal is, it's not merzik mavashel, and there's no reason to ask them. So let it yet have einik Shabbos. The svar samachmirin is, it's merzik machame. It has all the specifications of a eish, because it is yatzel this boy, and you're putting it from the fridge into the warming drawer, it's merzik machame. Again, in a certain sense, it's maybe worse than on top of the challah pot or on the side of the blech, because that's not the derech of chimum, and this is the derech of chimum. The Makilim will say, what do you mean derech chimum? Chazal didn't ask chimum. Chazal asked bishul, not chimum. So that's why lamaisa I must mention that those that are mekel lechatchila, but again, it's only with the precondition that it has to be dry food. If you take challah from the refrigerator that's cold, so then there's yesh bishul acha bishul by the liquid. Rav Strasser has a short tshuva in that kuntris, and he says that he's mekel to put lechatchila from the fridge into the warming drawer, but b'tnai chomor, that it's a davar yavesh and not a davar lach. Because davar lach yesh bishul acha bishul. And in that kuntris on Amud Reish Chaf, he discusses a number of foods that have a little bit liquid and a lot of solid or a mixture. So you have to heat, like Rav Strasser writes, before you mekel, you have to learn with you yourself and your bnei abayis, wives and children, what is yavesh and what is lach. Because by davar lach, we're not mekel, because yesh bishul acha bishul davar lach. So those that are mekel were only by a davar yavesh. Of course, that's his bashal kol tzarchim. Now, lamaisa, I want to make a point before we move on to the next group of questions. The warming drawer have some unavoidable problems. Some of them. Some have, it's sort of like a convection mode, that there's always a fan that's circulating the warm air to keep the heat uniform. When you open that type of warming drawer, the fan goes off. That's it. Push it. When you close it, the fan goes on. So forget about the mechzik mavashi, you're putting off and on a fan. So that, of course, we don't use. There's some warming drawers that have a light in it that goes on and off. So, that's obvious, like a refrigerator. The more complicated in its design, the more complicated Hilchos Shabbos. So we're talking about a simple one, that there's no fan, there's no light. But there's another issue that you have to deal with. And that is opening an oven. Some are concerned that if you open an oven on Shabbos, you might put on the heating element. So why isn't a warming drawer any different than opening an oven? Maybe when you open the drawer, the heating element is off, and you open the drawer, and because of the sudden induction of cold air, you're putting on the heating element. So taka, some say that's why they don't like to use it. Maybe you're going to put it on. The makilim, the matirim, would say, first of all, it's only a suffix, sigresha. And also, there's a fundamental difference between opening an oven and opening a warming drawer. An oven you set, let's say, at 350, 400. So the contrast from room temperature, 70 degrees, and the temperature it's supposed to maintain is pretty drastic, from 70 to 350, 400. But a warming drawer, that's, again, it can range from 195, especially a Shabbos mode does not exceed 195, 195 to 250. So it's not such a sick ratio that even cold air entering will make a change. Another big svara, which I think is a very reasonable svara, if you open an oven and you put on the heating element, that's a malacha deraisa. What malacha deraisa? You're putting on the heating element, the coil. That's a matchiz that gets glowing hot. That's a deraisa. In the warming drawer, l'chol hayoisa, you're putting on this. Actually, it's not a bar, but something similar to a bar that never gets red hot. So it's the issur d'Rabbanan, which is very chama, but it's not a potential deraisa. So basically, those that are matir would say, if you want to open it, so first we'll hope that it's only a suffix sigresha, but don't keep it open too long. Some people like to open it and serve from it. It's not kedai. Open it, take out the food, and close it. Then you can open it and put it back, but not to keep it open too long. That might be sort of a sigresha. Another interesting question, which again, if you don't know the Metzias, it might sound strange, but it's obvious. Many, if not most, warming drawers have the heating element on the bottom of the drawer itself. In other words, typically the drawer has a heating element in the bottom of it, and you open the drawer, and the drawer with the food and the heating element comes out. You push it back, and that's where you use it. Some older models have the heating element in the base of it. But the drawer is separate, and the base has the heating element under it. So the question is, if the drawer has no heating elements, you can open and close the drawer, it's no problem. But let's say you have one that has the heating element in the drawer itself. So you're moving muktzah on Shabbos. You open it, you're closing it, you're moving a heating element. So that sounds intimidating, but it's not so problematic. Because even if the part of the drawer is the muktzah, but there's also food in the drawer. So it's a bus of het and issur. You'll say, but if I took out all the food, how could I close the drawer? So someone told me, his Rav told him, you're allowed to open the drawer, but you can't close it. So I said, so what do you do? Whole shop, keep it open? He goes, no. We set it to go off at a certain time. Then we open it, but we don't close it. I said, well, that's not a problem. I guess he didn't have the whole story. The truth is that if you hold that it's muktzah and it's empty, then you can't close it. But it's more likely to say that this drawer has two functions. A base for the fire, and also it's a drawer for food. So it could be, we're looking like a kli shemalachta leheta, and also for the fire. But it's not made only for the fire, it's made for the food also. So therefore, lamaisa, some people dafka like to take one that has the heating element separate on the bottom, not in the drawer. But this is a little bit about the do's and don'ts of the warming drawer. But basically, it seems that the warming drawer is an option if you know what doing. And again, like everything else, we have to be educated consumers. We have to ask what we're buying. Don't just buy and blindly. The Sachrim, most of them know what the question, the details. They should know enough to guide you. This is basically a little bit about the warming drawers. Now, moving on to another fascinating shayla. In both yeshivas, I'm zocheh to give a share. They have the shayla midi Shabbos b'Shabbatoi, because you want to keep food warm, and you don't have enough oven space, or you don't want to keep the oven on. So they have what's called a warmer. Now, a warming drawer is part of a kitchen. A warmer is an independent, like a closet. Now, you see these warmers by a kiddush in a shul. They're probably 3 feet high. They keep kugel in it and challah in it. It's called a warmer. It's a metal box. The ones that I have in the yeshiva that I saw are probably 7 feet tall. At least a head taller than I am, for sure. And it keeps the whole Shabbos Suda, both night and day, are kept in that warmer. It's fascinating to study it. And all the food is fully cooked, and they keep it in the warmer, and they close it, and they need food to take it out. Now, the temperature, at least the reading, does not exceed 220. Now, it could be it goes a little higher, but it's officially 220 is the max. So the question is, can you fill this up before Shabbos, because there's no blech in these warmers? So the answer is, first of all, as we said, if it's fully cooked, you don't need a blech. Now, if it's non-adjustable, like some of them are, so you have another heta, that is no shami yachata. But what I found challenging, a real-life shayla, because the yeshiva serves, I think during the winter, 11:30, after the Bacham learn a few hours, they have a Leil Shabbos Toyameh, shalom for Friday night. There are a few Bacham that they want to learn Ritzuf until 12:30. But you can't miss the mitzvah of Toyameha, it's at least a deraisa, Friday night shalom. So they come down and they took the challah out and scooped some and put it back. And how you're putting it back into the warmer, you're missing rule number 1. What's that? There's no blech. It's taka hot and it's taka varm and it's taka yad and das Allah. But you don't have a blech. So you can't put back on Shabbos without a blech. So what I told him is, what makes more sense to me, pull out the tray, and the trays are probably close to 3 feet. These long trays. Pull it out, scoop out what you want from the part that's out of the warmer, keep part of it in the warmer, and then slide it back. What's my cheshbon? Pasha. Really, the challah is fully cooked. Why can you scoop out from the challah in the warmer itself? Because you can't make hagasa al gabi eish. And we have to assume that a warmer that has a temperature of 220 is pretty much a gabi eish. Even though you can't cook there, but it's a gabi eish. But you slide it out, so the part that's out, it's not a gabi eish. But since part of it is still a gabi eish, it's not chazar. It's like butler shir rishayna. And Baruch Shemai founder of Moshe is quoted as saying, "Mamish this yisoid," not regarding a warmer. He didn't see warmers, but regarding a regular oven. Some people kept in those days food in the oven. So he says, take out the rack and put it back. The Zocher v'Shomer Afalkin is safe at page 175 has Mamish this shayla, and he's also making as Rastrasa and Shabbos Shabbat Omer Ayin. So basically, this is using the warmer, taking it out, and putting it back. Now, the same is true regarding another very commonly asked question, and that is basically they use the oven Friday night, and it goes off with the Shabbos mode. Now, there's a half a tray of kugel in the oven, still hot, The oven is still on. They say, you know what, let's put it onto the blech so we'll have it for tomorrow. So the question is, can you take it from the oven, it's still on, and put it on top of the blech, onto the hot place of the fire. So it sounds intimidating. You're putting food on the fire, but then where's it coming from? Agabi eish, coming from the oven. So you got to put from eish to eish. So the chatchil, you could take the kugel, as long as the oven is still on, from the oven, or even challah, whatever it is, and take it from the oven and put it agabi eish, of course, with a blech. That's eish to eish. Now, someone asked, he's a besser mensch, the kugel is going to dry out a whole night over. Keep it on top of on the blech. He wants to take the kugel from the oven and put it into the challah pot. So we'll have a challah kugel. That'll be even better. So l'chayr, same thing. It's from eish to eish, right? It's going from the oven into the challah pot. But the only problem is, if your kugel has the halachic status of afiyah, if it's baked, not cooked, so now by putting it into challah, if the challah is moist, it might be yesh bishul achar afiyah. Now again, if you have a dry challah, or you have a kugel that's considered bishul, fine. But if you have this not good combination, if the kugel is classified as a afiyah, and you're putting it into a moist challah, that will be the effect of a bishul, you have a problem of yesh bishul achar afiyah. So approach with caution. Let me tell you an exciting shayla, nothing less than exciting. Happened this winter, and I was very happy when I learned to share that I'd be able to connect it to. Someone had a stovetop full of different foods on it, and the fire went out. I don't know how, but the fire went out. And he realized that if by tomorrow it's going to be cold, he's going to have cold kugel and chol, and he was panicking. But he was a very crafty individual, and he lived in an older home, and he still had what some people don't know what it is any longer, but he had what's called radiators. And in yeshiva, I said the word radiator. What's that? But in homes like, most homes today that are older homes have radiators. So he decided, let me try it. Can't go wrong. He had a few radiators in different rooms in the house. And it was for him, was lucky that it was a very cold winter evening. And he put the food on various radiators. And he kept it pretty hot. After Shabbos, someone told him, what are you doing? You took food and you put it onto a makam ha'esh. And don't forget that the fire went out already. See, it was coming from a non-eish, and the fellow assumed that a radiator, if it's hot enough, is a makam eish. So it sounds scary, but for us it's moslik midvash, because it's really ein bishul acha bishul. The food that he placed on the radiators were all fully cooked, and even if there was a challah, but it was still hot. So ein bishul acha bishul if it's still hot. So what was his biggest crime? Mechzik mavashel. No one cooks on a radiator. And I found Rav Moshe Grada in Chelik Dalet Siman Ayin Dal Sif Kot Lamed Dalet, the Bris Olam, the Aruch Shabbos, and others say this exact case. Taking food that there's no shayla bishul, either dry or hot challah, and putting it onto a radiator that will keep it, or even cold dry food, and make it piping hot, is mutter. Bishul, it's not in bishul acha bishul. And merzi, it's not, because no one cooks on a radiator. Now, if you want to do this, it's fine, but if you value shalom bayis, don't put the kugel directly onto the radiator, because the whole house will smell from kugel, and it will have a kugel painting job on it. We'll have the color from it, so make sure you wrap it up well. Now, this is also an interesting question. Someone has, like today, many people use the oven, and it goes off with a Shabbos mode. Bekitza, he wanted to take food from the refrigerator, fully cooked food, dry food, and put it into the oven that's already off. Someone asked me, he wanted to put matzah. He eats matzah between Pesach and Shavuos. The matzah got a little stale. He wanted to put matzah into the oven that's still very hot, because it went off, but now it's off. It was on, so it's still pretty hot, but there's no fire on it. So the truth is that if there's no fire, so it's not al-gabi eish. It's still hot, so you're lucky. But no one cooks in an oven that's off. Now, the innocent bystander that walks into your house and sees you putting food into the oven, so I'll ask you a better question. If you take out food from the oven, and you had all the preconditions, can you put it back in the oven? About you could. Can you put food right onto the can you take a challah pot and put it directly onto the fire if you have all the preconditions? Yeah. The innocent bystander. That's not Maris Ayin, that he's a critical person. It's Maris either for you or for someone else not to do things that are wrong. But putting into an oven that's off is not wrong. It's not bishul. So it's more likely to say that as long as the oven is off, it's not merzikim avashel. Now, if the food is fully cooked and dry, gesundheit. Now, the next question, also interesting. Someone wants to have hot kugel or chicken that's dry, but he doesn't have a radiator during the summer, so he wants to put it on the outer perimeter of the blech. Now, let's be very simple, okay? Those that have a blech know what I'm talking about. Let's say this stender is a blech. So you have a fireplace where actually the fire is. We'll call that spot number 1 a gabi oesh. Now next to that is pretty hot. But the outer perimeter, spot number 3, doesn't even reach Yatzer Levis Boy. It's good to take the chill out of kugel or chicken, but does never reach Yatzer Levis Boy. Okay? So spot number 1 is a gabi oesh. 2 gets hot, but not a gabi oesh. And spot number 3 does never reach Yatzer Levis Boy. Can I take from the refrigerator onto spot number 3 lechatchila? So again, if you think about it, if it never reaches Yatzer Levis Boy, it's not an eish. Merzi, someone walks in and sees me taking the refrigerator, putting it onto the blech, but he knows you're an elachayit, and he knows you have a cheshbon, and you know you have a cheshbon. You're not doing things that are wild. I'm putting it on the non-eish. And Rav Moshe and Chelik Aleph, Tzadik Dalid, and Dalid, Ayin Dalid, Lamed Beis, both Chuvas clearly says, if you are certain that that place is never Yatzer Levis, it's mutar lechatchila. Now, the truth is it's not practical because it's not going to get very hot. Rather put it on top of a challah pot, or if you have a radiator, but this is mutar. Now, I must mention the Chazaynish in Lamed Zayin Ches has come out this shaila, and he says, but there's no mechitza, there's no place that says a caution, here is spot 2, here is spot 3. Like there's no place, how do you know you're not putting on a place that might get hot? And Taka Rabbi Yashiv in the Oitzer Shabbos on the Tofhei was choishish because you might put it on a spot that is Yatzer Levis. Okay, so that's something very reasonable. But l'chayra, if you know for sure that this area is not Yatzer Levis, you'll put your hand on it, nothing, you don't jump back, it would be mutter miyikidin to put food from the refrigerator onto that hot spot. Question. Someone wants to have a Leil Shabbos Tayameh. Now, as you know, the halacha, you can't scoop al gabi eish, so you have to have someone holding it and someone scooping, or if you do it yourself, you might drop it. He says, you know what, give me a better eitzah. I want to have challah Friday night. I don't want to be oiv agosa. I want to not drop the challah. Is there any simple eitzah? And the answer is yes. Let me say something very simple. The challah right now is al gabi eish, spot number 1. What you could do is move it to spot number 2, or certainly spot number 3, and then you could scoop out the challah. Ay hagosa, teretz is not a gabi eish. It's a gosa only gabi eish. So loimi boy spot number 3 hagosa is mutter. Even spot number 2 is mutter. It's not a gabi eish. It's hot, so who cares? The issa gosa gabi eish. It's not a gabi eish. When you finish, slide it back. It was never batla shir b'shayin. It was always on the blech. The kiddush is, and Rabbi says this as well, that even if you put it to spot number 3, that doesn't get hot, but you didn't take it off the blech. Why is that worse than if you're holding it in your hand in midair? Then you're allowed to put it back on the blech. And on the blech is worse? Doesn't make sense. So if you want to do things safely, not hold it and support it and get someone else, slide it to spot number 2 or 3. Again, 2 sounds a little, problematic because it's hot. 3 sounds better, but then how do you push it back? But both are mutter. Because both are not a problem, because it's not batla shir rishayna. It was there and it never came off the fire. Now, people like to warm challah on Shabbos. So the truth is, Reb Shlomo Zalman originally, and there's a tshuva quoted in the Ma'or Shabbos Aleph Tov Tzadikei, felt you could even take it from the room temperature and put it directly onto the blech al gabi eish. Mechzik mavashel? The answer is simple. It's not mechzik mavashel. No one cooks, no one bakes challah, putting it onto the fire. But then in Chelik Beis, on Tovkuf Lamed Aleph, the Mechaber pointed out that we don't put foods onto the fire, and there's no difference, this food or that food. So Rabbi Zalman said, even though I think it's mutter, because if you're allowed to certain cases of Agabi Kedera is mutter, why is this worse? But Ani Chayza. So his great Anivas, he was Chayza. But the Or Letzion in Siman Perik Lamed, Siman Yud Gimel, is Mekel Lechatchila, because it's not Mersikim Avashel. In other words, we would think like plug and foods, and he's Mekel. Rav Vozn Chelik Yud, the end of Siman Tezvav, is more Noitel Lahakol. He says the better is to put it on, not exactly on top of the fire, on a place close to the fire. The truth is that if you put it on top of the fire, you might make toast, which makes it a little worse because that's like making a new creation. That's like toast, not what to make on Shabbos. But basically, it's no problem of putting the challah on top of a challah pot. That's certainly mutal chaladeis, not mechzi. The only issue is it might make it fleshik. You can have with fish or lava malka. Beautiful question. Someone wanted to put frozen challah to defrost quickly on top of a challah pot. But that's another issue because they usually ice particles on a frozen challah. And sometimes the ice particles come from the challah itself. Sometimes it comes from the freezer. But in either case, it's definitely, it's tana magamri, it's frozen. So you run into an issue of cooking not the challah, the ice particles. And taka, that's an issue you have to contend with because that's warming frozen water. I'll tell you a beautiful shayla, but you see how halach is so attentive to every nuance. Someone wants to rewarm cold chicken or cold kugel, dry. So he doesn't have a challah pot, he uses a crock pot. So can you take the cold chicken, cold kugel from the refrigerator and put it on top of the crock pot? What's the shayla? The Mechaber speaks about a challah pot. So why is crock pot different? Ma'anishtana. So Rabbi Yashiv in Ashri Ish Chelik Beis Amud Reish Pei says a novel yisoid. He says if in the times of the Shulchan Aruch it was perfectly mutter, because you're not putting it on Gabi Aish, you're putting it on top of challah pot. That's a Gabi Aish. Or today, if you have a Plata and you have the challah pot on top of the Plata, and you put the dry kugel on top of the challah pot, what are you doing? A Gabi Kedera. But if you have a crock pot, that's one unit, the heating element and the pot is one piece, so you're putting it on top of the challah pot, true, but what else? Makam ha'esh. Because in this pot, in this crock pot, is the eish. So you're putting agabi ha'esh. And he says there that he wanted to be mefarsim, that people misquoted him, that he feels that would be like putting in agabi ha'esh. Now, this is a big chiddush, because the truth is that it's not a question of bishul. And what is the worst scenario by putting it on top of a crock pot that's one piece? Mechzik mavashel. Is this action mechzik mavashel? On top of a crock pot? Now, do I know if it's one piece or two pieces? I never thought of being mechzik mavashel. So those that are mekel, I know where they're coming from. They say the deciding factor is not if it's an eish in it, is it mechzik mavashel? And the truth is, on top of a crock pot, it's not mechzik mavashel whether it's one piece or not. And last but not least, someone asked this recently, and I was surprised, but that's where you have to know halacha, that he wants to keep a sterno, to keep the food hot with a sterno. Those that are not familiar, you go to a smorgasbord, it's basically denatured, jellied alcohol that burns for many hours. So he wants to use a sterno on either erev Shabbos or put food onto a pot that's being heated by a sterno on Shabbos. So the emphasis is to keep food on a sterno erev Shabbos is perfectly mutter because the food is fully cooked. The sterno does not cook the food. So we said earlier, once the food is at least meichel ben the soy, you don't need a blech. But more convincing, and that is, why do you need a blech on the makam ha'esh? Shema yachata. A sterno, there is no shema yachata. So even if you would say you do need a blech, there's no shema yachata. I was told recently that they're making a new type of sterno that is adjustable. So then you have a problem. Then you have to think, know the right eitzah. But the point is, the bottom line is, the ikka is it mechzikim avashel? Is it shema yechata? And the sterno would be a perfect example where it's not shema yechata. And mechzikim avashel would not be an issue if you're doing it before Shabbos. Someone said, why can I put directly onto the blech? That's not mechzikim avashel. And taka, one of the ha'intik paiskim is mekel onto the blech and mechzikim avashel. But that truth is, that's not true. Because people do cook from erev Shabbos, they put the blech on, they put the challah on. So you can't make the blech not a mechzikim avashel, but agabi akadeir is mutter. I will talk to you. Thank you for listening.
Shame the issue to like to be a character of Smith with today's shir. Bez Hashem after Mincha, Smith will say a sequel of the shir. There's free CDs available on the back table. But I need to catch him with the Baruch of Zakas is a show. If you give him time, mention him out on the Yakov, and I'll sit the Yagdol to the Yagdol.